Were you that person who was always helping your peers with their problems in class? Maybe you're a self-improvement nerd who's constantly thinking about how you can level up. Perhaps in this case, teaching and learning is a career path to consider. And this doesn't always mean being an academic or a classroom teacher either. Welcome to Programmable, where we talk to tech luminaries to help you with your career. Programmable is brought to you by JDoodle, the AI coding suite for learning and building together. You can try our easy-to-use online development environment and start coding in over 88 programming languages in seconds. I'm Lucas Hakewill, talking to Hannah Beeder. Hannah is a multidisciplinary learning designer and educator. She started her career interning as a software engineer at Google and then graduated to Macquarie Bank. She's now learning manager at Cadmus, a startup which improves the assessment experience for university students and educators. A former software engineer, Hannah enjoys researching, designing, and creating edtech products. She studied computer science at UNSW, was cohort lead and mentor at Code Like a Girl, and recognised as New South Wales Young Woman of the Year in 2020. Hannah, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. What an intro.
It's so great to have you here. A lot of our listeners, I think, would count intern at Google as a dream job. What was that like?
Well, what it was like in hindsight, I think, is different to what it was like at the time. At the time, it was very overwhelming and my first real job, my first foray into full-time work. In hindsight, I was 19. It was an internship. It seems kind of wild that they hired students, that they hired people of that age, of that cohort, but actually by then I was stepping into what was already a very well-established large intern program. And so I think, yeah, in retrospect, it was just crazy that happened. But at the time, I was like, oh my God, me, Google? And the work itself was really fun. It's where I first started doing front-end projects that weren't just for me, and working on software that felt like it had a real kind of purpose beyond completing an assessment or teaching me something about what I'm doing. And it was really fun. I met lovely people. Many of my uni friends were involved at the same time as well. It built community, and I'm still in touch with many of my co-workers from then today.
So there's something about being able to build a project that someone else has asked for or someone else wants that's not just for the purpose of an exercise, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the coolest thing was I picked up the mantle from the previous year's interns, one of whom actually was a friend of mine from university. So, you do group work at uni, you work on code bases together, but essentially you're always starting from scratch. And this was one of the first times I dived into a pre-existing code base and had to work around that, improve that, work with the other people's code. And that is a huge skill, a requirement. It's when you get into full-time work, suddenly you're like, whoa, I got to start things from scratch. That's a crazy thing that, you can start with blue sky, green fields, whatever you want to call it. But at the time, it was my first time diving into a big code base as well.
And that's something that you really don't get very often at university, a giant code base full of spaghetti code that you need to untangle.
Yes.
How did you think about building that muscle?
It was interesting in a way, like when you learn to drive a car, you're learning actually lots of different skills at the same time. So steering, moving, speeding up, slowing down, checking everything, being aware of your surroundings. It felt very similar in that way. So you've got this big code base, and it taught me all about requirements gathering, about limitations and strengths of code that's been sitting on the shelf for a while and picking that up. It taught me about collaborating because I had a partner I was working with directly, and we would often pair program. And it also taught me about kind of system requirements and how to, connect what you think you need to do with how you're actually going to do it, and trying to execute a level of quality that is, in many ways hamstrung or limited by the choices that were made in the past. And that is really more, that's really more identifiable as what a software engineer would do, more so than I open a new repo and I write the first line of code for my brilliant idea that's going to make me millions of dollars, and I make perfect decisions at all times that never have any consequences. So, yeah.
So there's really no perfect decisions in software design or software development.
There's perfect decisions with the information available at the time, perhaps.
Right, you're dealing with the constraints that are...
Yes.
Yeah, navigating constraints. Let's step back for a second. I'd really love for you to talk us through, what did a day in the life of you as a software engineer look like?
I might talk a little bit more about my experience at Macquarie, only because it was quite a lot longer than my internship and more recent. And we're talking ancient history now, just to provide some context for everyone. That was a long time ago. And at Macquarie, I was in a graduate program where I did 4 6-month rotations as a software engineer in different teams across the group. And so a day in the life, corporate Australia, you show up in time, on time, in time to be at your desk. And depending on the team I was working in, usually I would open up our project management software, see the ticket I was working on today, or if I was in the midst of something, I would be just opening up my IDE and getting started from there, getting a little bit done before stand up at 10 or 10:15, where we would meet with the rest of the team and talk through our projects for the day, what we would be working on, who we might need assistance from, any meetings that are coming up, and that kind of thing. And then essentially you would be just working on your little piece of the universe. Sometimes we'd be pair programming depending on the team I was in. Sometimes I'd be working directly with a manager. Sometimes I would just be coding on my own, submitting that for review. It was really fun as well to review my teammates' code. It was a great way to learn more about the art of the technician of coding without having to be the one coding. So learning how to provide feedback and how the systems all interact with each other, and any meetings that come up around project requirements, around scoping, around new features. Each week we would have a sprint planning meeting, a backlog refinement meeting, a meeting where we would agree on the size of the tasks and who would be doing them for the upcoming sprint. So pretty standard software engineering kind of agile processes there.
Fantastic. I think for anyone who's listening, who's thinking about a career in software engineering, never really considered what does a day in the life look like, that's a super helpful outline. Now, you're no longer working as a software engineer, Hannah. Talk to me a bit about the decision that went there, your gradual kind of move to more learning focused roles.
Yeah, absolutely. It all started when I became a tutor at uni, and it was a really fantastic job to have. It was a really fantastic set of skills to develop, and I really, really loved tutoring various subjects at university. A lot of first-year computing, computing for designers, computing for engineers, human-computer interaction, which was my area of specialization, computing 1A, all of these things where you interact with like young, new learners who are, well, who I was going to say who are excited to be there, some of whom are not excited to be there, but who certainly need to learn some things and then demonstrate that they've done so. And that's where I really established my love of teaching and of working directly with learners to help them build capacity and get a handle on things that will really serve them in their careers moving forward. And what happened was, we all graduated, and then most people took their software engineering jobs and stopped teaching. And I had a bit of a crisis because I was like, well, I actually really like doing that, so I want to keep doing it. So even while I was working full-time as a software engineer, I continued to tutor these subjects at the university and maintain my connection there. And it's also where I came across Code Like a Girl, who I still work with today in teaching Python programming to people online. And so what happened was I maintained this connection. I continued to teach while I worked. And at the same time, I was noticing that a lot of my peers in my full-time work were really conscientious, dedicated, committed to what they did, but also really, really loved coding in a way that maybe, if I'm honest, I never did. And so I realized that actually what that was a symbol of more broadly, if I zoomed out, was people doing the thing that they really connect with. And what that meant was I would probably be outcompeted in terms of the level of energy and effort that would be put in, because when someone's really doing what they love, you kind of get this extra boost, this extra kind of well of energy, this well of kind of enjoyment that you can draw from to do what needs to be done. And so when an opportunity came up for me to move into a what was at the time a creative technology role, but teaching, I thought, well, maybe I should just go and do the thing that I like doing, and everyone can continue doing the thing that they like doing, and I just need to go and do that for myself. So that's what happened. A role came up and it was the right time. It was a very challenging decision because there's always a part of you, especially if you're in engineering or in the software industry, where at the time, I'd really lucked out. I learned this thing that became a really interesting, lucrative career to have. And then I had to kind of say, well, maybe it's not for me. And there was a part of me that was worried that, what if I want to go back? Or what if I want to change my mind? And then I'm further behind and I don't know things and I haven't been practicing this whole time. But in reality, that's just your brain playing tricks on you. You can spend so much time thinking I'm in the wrong spot. Let's do something about that. And then as soon as you do it, your brain's like, you sure? What if you're throwing your life away? But it's just a case of becoming comfortable with change, I think. And so when that opportunity arose, I took the leap and I went there.
Amazing. And you were able to, you kind of de-risked that decision, right? Because you'd been tutoring at university, you'd been working at Code Like a Girl, you had these experiences where you were able to actually test this out. Hey, do I get more energy from teaching versus, just cutting code every day? And it sounds like you kind of had enough data points to know, yeah, this is a better move for me. Maybe not financially, that's a future for future Hannah to decide or discover. But from the perspective of your energy and excitement for the work, it sounds like it was a pretty easy decision.
Absolutely. And I think, finances is one thing. I think it's more around how you envision your life long term. And, most people will be working for what is a really, really long time. And what I found was these decisions that in my first few years of work felt so important and so weighty, and they kind of weren't, because you've got a lot of time to do things. And when you're young, you're like, I have to do everything now. I have to get promoted. I have to demonstrate my value. I have to it's all because it's new. You want to kind of make the most of it and ensure that you're doing the right thing. But the older I've gotten, the more I've realized that if you're course correcting all the time, that's a good skill to have, and you're not getting dumber, you're not getting less experienced. Everything is valuable, and every kind of experience you have in a job is going to inform your decisions later on. So yeah, I don't spend too much time thinking back going, oh, what could have been, because I knew that even if I'd stayed, I probably would have left just later on. So I feel like there is some aspect of inevitability when you're being honest with yourself about what you enjoy doing.
Pretty much everyone I've spoken to on this podcast has not ended up in the role or the career that they expected to.
Right.
And almost universally, people say, actually, just allow some happenstance in your career, or allow yourself to move in the directions that you're finding more interesting. It seems to
Absolutely.
really work out well for people.
I think so. And, if you kind of want to backwards map that, it's probably because people don't know who they will be for the rest of their lives at 18 when they're making choices about what to study or how to spend their time. And so some people do, and that's fantastic. You got a vision and it's going to suit, but thinking of a life holistically works one part of that. And so there are different aspects of what you do with your time and the kind of impacts a job will have on what you envision for the rest of your life that will shift and change as your priorities change over time. So if we're thinking like, is it weird that I didn't get that right? Probably not. But is it possible to reach an outcome no matter what you choose? I think so.
Absolutely. In that transition period from software engineer to learning manager, you worked on some really interesting projects. First at Code Like a Girl, and then at your company Creatable. Can you talk a little bit about maybe first Code Like a Girl? What was that like? What was the purpose? How were you working with
Yeah,
them?
absolutely. So Code Like a Girl, I actually met through Macquarie because they were a sponsor of Code Like a Girl at the time. And it was in 2018 when they were first kind of moving into New South Wales as a market. So Code Like a Girl's based down in Victoria. And so they were actually looking for programming educators and instructors in New South Wales. And it was kind of a right place, right time kind of thing. So I was able to meet the founder, Ali Watson, and we got in touch, stayed in touch, and from there became this really fantastic opportunity where I was teaching classes in person on the weekends. And then when COVID happened, Code Like a Girl opened up their School of Code, which is an online coding education platform for women and non-binary people. And during that time, I took on the role of Python programming tutor for their Python Primer course. And I've been doing that ever since. So it's been a good 4 years of teaching Python online, and the people I meet through it are absolutely fantastic. Always such an interesting group, ranging from career changes to career returners, those who've had a bit of a break and are wanting to upskill or reskill, university students who are studying various degrees that also would like to learn Python or supplement their degree with some extra skills acquisition. It's been a fantastic way to meet people from all over the country and all over the world. Because it's online, you get students from various different places. I was teaching students in Indonesia, students in South Africa, students in Zimbabwe. So it was fantastic. And during such a disconnected time, to have a community like that was really fantastic. And in my role at Creatable, that was the job I took after Macquarie. That was the opportunity that came along that seemed like it would be really fulfilling, and it was. Creatable at the time was a creative technology program for stage 5 D&T in New South Wales. So stage 5 is years 9 and 10 in high school studying design and technology. And the whole purpose was to make coding and technology accessible to young women, rather than trying to, take an existing curriculum and make it relevant. We started with what are these young women interested in and designed the projects around it. So For 2 years in that role, I was working across various girls' schools in Sydney, delivering this program in a classroom setting. And it was really fantastic to actually engage with the girls and kind of meet them where they were at. We did all sorts of things ranging from 3D modeling and 3D printing to soldering and electronics and coding and robotics and wearables and textiles and all the ways in which these things kind of interact with each other to create like a meaningful connection. The favorite project that I ran was actually AR technologies, where we got students using the patch coding editor in Metaspark Studio so they could make interactive AR filters that they could then upload to their social media and things like this, all the while secretly. Now you know how to use patch coding, which is really important if you want to go and be a video game editor. So that's nice. And it was just fantastic to see finally when the connection is made that this isn't something inaccessible and uncool. It's like, oh yeah, I could do that and I could do things that I like and care about. And then what happened was we transitioned to more teacher professional development, and I got a taste of building a SaaS product, building a edtech platform MVP. As the tech lead and project manager on that, we worked with a codeless platform to develop that MVP and created all the course materials, intending to help teachers develop future skills for students that will help them no matter the path they choose with their lives moving forward. So it was a really fantastic experience just to learn more about educators, to do some really fantastic education research into skills like evaluation, evaluative thinking, perseverance, compassion, these skills that really are subject agnostic, that are, career path agnostic, that will help students to become really well-rounded citizens. And it was a really fun experience that also connected me more deeply with the secondary education industry, which, in my current role, I'm working in tertiary, but you've got to get a handle on these things and how these big behemoth systems work if you want to kind of operate within them. So that was really fantastic. And then again, the heart's work from within Creatable. UNICEF Australia had heard what we were doing with these girls' schools in Sydney and how we were making STEM accessible to young women, and procured some curriculum development from us in terms of a STEM curriculum for Year 8 students in Burundi. And so for my entire time there, I was working on this curriculum that was aiming to teach students over in Burundi about science, technology, engineering, and maths, but in a really, really deeply contextualized way. So what we were able to create was a textbook, a learning program, and some teacher training around building a solar still, which is a water distillation device that you can make out of wood and plastic and glass, and a rocket stove, which is an efficient wood-burning stove that can be made out of mud bricks and a piece of grate, and that's about it. But what the students learn in the process is experimentation, but also incomplete and complete combustion, about the water cycle, about global warming and the things that the greenhouse gas effect impact. So the greenhouse gas effect is what actually is like occurring inside the solar still. You're making a little kind of chamber in there. So you're really, hiding the vegetables in the bolognese, if you will. And we actually were able to visit Burundi last year, which was just such a rewarding experience. The teachers over there had been embedding this program, and we were able to go and see all the wonderful things that the students had done and all the ways they'd taken those key skills and applied them to other things, other ideas they had come up with to help improve their communities' experience, their families' experience. And it was just such a rewarding experience to actually see the impacts of the work that you've done. And just to round it all out, based on your original question, the thing that kind of led me from one to another was the bit I enjoyed about software engineering the most, which is seeing what your work is actually doing out in the real world. And any educator can tell you that to whatever extent they're involved in whatever role they're in, that's an aspect that's always going to feel really, really fantastic, is seeing the impact of your work out there in the real world.
Wow. Oh, that's such an incredible journey. There's a couple of things I'd really love to unpack from that, Hannah.
Sure.
And maybe the first is, so this will be, I guess, from my experience and knowledge of culture in Australia, it's going to differ in different cultures. But we know that that young women, there's a certain point at which, as you described, STEM becomes maybe a little uncool. And we know that so much work has gone into fixing this, because this leads to fewer women becoming software engineers or moving into STEM fields. What's been your perspective on what's worked in the work that you've done in trying to help young women get really excited and interested in the STEM topics that you teach?
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for drawing attention to that. You're so right that it's really a known problem with a known quantity, and there are a range of different initiatives out there that are being implemented to kind of engage young women in STEM and in tech more specifically. The things that I found that really worked is knowing and understanding, learning about what they currently care about, whether that is a different subject or just something in their life, and enabling them to apply design thinking processes and learn and build tech skills around solving a problem that's meaningful to them. And that is probably, when you say it, it's like, yeah, that makes sense, get them with the thing that they're interested in and put the rest along the way. But it's actually also mirrors more effectively how coding is actually applied in the real world. We started this conversation talking about your own, graveyard of code bases for the little projects that you set up to yourself just to learn how to code. And I think that belies the reality of coding. Yes, you can learn to code by making your own little things, but in reality, the motivation, and once you become a practitioner, is the application. It's all in the application. And, you've worked in startups as well. You've worked in the startup industry and incubation spaces as well. And so what you would see is people coming with an idea, and then rather than being the destination, coding's not the destination. Coding's the journey you take to get to the destination, which is solving the problem that you care about. So that seems to apply quite nicely across contexts. In the Australian context and in Burundi, you just have to be able to learn what that context is. And sometimes there's no room for that. Sometimes there's no time and space, but that is certainly what I've found to be effective. And also not to presume that So these projects that we ran with the girls, they had about a 2-year shelf life, I would say, at which point they'd moved on. Filters on Instagram, not that cool anymore. So you're always on your toes, and you got to have the space to be able to redo your programming, as in your educational programming, to reflect those interests. So it is a time-consuming and challenging process, but that's what I found to work.
But if you really want to motivate learners,
Yes.
you can't just take a one-size-fits-all approach. Everyone does this project. Doesn't work, right?
Well, you can, but then you'll see the impact of that in the level of engagement among the learners. Those who are really, it's resonating, they will engage more enthusiastically. And for those it's not, they won't. And so managed choice is a great approach where you can help to guide the kinds of ideas that they are producing in order to inform the kind of tech they're implementing. And many teachers, especially in secondary, they're specialized in their own area, but then tasked with teaching something like coding where they themselves need to learn as well as the students. And so knowing, the limitations and constraints that we're working with, it is important to kind of guide the decision making if you're going to be open-ended about it and let them do a bit of a choose your own adventure approach, for sure.
Absolutely. And oh my goodness, I'm a maths teacher or I'm a geography teacher and I've just been given a class to teach AP Python or Introduction to Java.
Yes.
I can't imagine the stress.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then there's you're undergoing professional development, which is kind of where the PD stuff actually began for that role at Creatable as well. Was we were being asked by the teachers to help upskill them so that they could take our program and run it themselves, which ideally is how these things go, right? You shouldn't have to keep paying someone to come in and do the same thing. You should be able to build capacity in educators to do it themselves. And that's where the idea came from, was we were, running the programs with the students, but also running bespoke training for the teachers, just so they could be more, helpful during class time, or if there were questions when we weren't there, that they could answer them rather than having to defer to the next time we all meet together. So yes, I completely agree.
So Hannah, while you were working as a software developer, you were still teaching. It sounds like you were building that muscle for a long period of time. But I'm interested, for anyone who's listening, who's thinking, look, I'd really love to become a teaching assistant or an academic tutor, or I'm really interested in pursuing learning design. What do you think are the most important sort of mindset shifts or skills to build there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I go back even further, I was working since I was legally allowed to. 14 years and 9 months, I got my first job. And most of that period of my life, I worked in pharmacy. And it was a great way to learn about how to talk to people, how to interact with people, how to have a conversation, find out what really is ailing them, what they're looking for, how you can be helpful. And, there is a level of education within pharmacy assisting that I was able to undergo, which was really fantastic. So you become more knowledgeable about these things. But what it meant was, by the time I was standing in front of a classroom, yes, I was still nervous because I was a student, they were students. It's like, where's the teacher? Oh, it's me. But I knew how to talk. Believe it or not, Lucas, I knew how to talk. And so when it was, time to learn how to become a better educator, I began shadowing someone. That was my first role. I wasn't paid. I wasn't the tutor. I was assisting. And you mentioned this, becoming an assistant tutor or something of this nature. You really just take it all in and you see how the person you're learning from applies these styles, and whether that is how you're going to approach it or not. People have very different teaching styles. Not everything's going to work for you, but seeing how other people do it, and then having a confidence in the communication can come in handy. And I would say as well, don't be shy to just put your hand up, even if you don't know anything about the topic. Sounds a little funny, but not all people who know how to do things know how to teach someone to do that thing that they know how to do. And sometimes this is how teachers work. In the context where, secondary teachers need to suddenly learn how to code so they can teach the coding, they know how to teach, even if they don't know how to code. And in this situation, just because you don't know how to, do the thing that you want to become a teacher of, by trailing someone, by engaging with students, if we're talking about coding education, coding is not a thing that you do to great success at all times. And what I mean by that is you're going to be answering questions, you're going to be encountering problems, and you're going to need to be the problem solver who resolves that. So you can kind of learn as you teach about the thing that you are teaching. And you can learn how to teach from customer service.
I remember the first workshop I ever delivered. I'm pretty sure I had a script for every word that I was going to say. And at some
Yeah.
point I realized, hey, that doesn't work. Actually, you can't script a class.
No.
You have to be able to react to questions, and you
Yeah.
have to trust in your ability to talk through something. And
Yeah.
sometimes that means answering a question with, actually, I don't know the answer to that, or
100%.
let's figure it out together.
Yes. And being open and welcoming and acknowledging of the limitations of your own knowledge is going to land a lot better than your script. Or than you pretending that you know what the answer is, failing in front of them, and then kind of losing credibility because you claim to know and then it didn't work. It's like, let's learn together, let's figure it out together, and becoming a good investigator of things, and maintaining a calm demeanor. You're kind of mirroring the affect that you'd like them to have and the way you would like them to approach the problems they're solving.
I think that investigator mindset is really interesting and really important. And I suspect you may have learned that as a pharmacy assistant at 14 years and 9 months old, where you didn't want to have to go back to your boss and ask, every little question. You had to figure it
Right.
out, right?
Right.
I think that's
Right.
that's such an underrated skill in anyone's career.
Absolutely. Becoming autonomous doesn't mean never asking for help, but it does mean knowing when you are asking for help, that you've gone through a few different steps on your own first. Because usually, and from the other side of the coin, if you're training someone in a job, and they ask you for assistance, the first thing that you're going to ask is the first step in your own process for resolving that problem. So predictably, as someone learning things, you can kind of take yourself on a guided learning experience of, what is my boss likely to say if I ask them this question? And just kind of do that on your own first, see if you can figure it out, and then come to them saying, I've tried this, 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 and this. Here's what I found. I'm not sure if it answers the question. Thus, please, can you help me with this?
I really love that, and I think every great engineer is an amazing problem solver. And it's always about a balance of how long do I spend trying to solve the problem before I ask for help.
Yes.
Developing a really good radar for, hey, I'm diving into a rabbit hole. This is taking way too much time versus
Yeah.
I haven't even tried to solve the problem myself. Somewhere in the middle, isn't it?
Somewhere in the middle, for sure.
Okay, so I'd love to bring us back to the present. Your job at
Yes.
Cadmus, learning manager. Talk to us about what you're doing day to day.
Yeah, no problem. So the learning manager role at Cadmus is quite customer facing, and maybe I'll zoom out a little bit and just give a bit of a brief overview of Cadmus so that what I do makes more sense. Cadmus is an assessment for learning platform that helps academics to create fantastic scaffolded assessments for their students, manage the class, and investigate academic integrity concerns, and support students with their learning. So assessment for learning means that you are doing assessments to demonstrate your learning, but also to learn while doing the assessment. And for students, it's a fantastic online web editor with everything they need for their assessment all in one space. The instructions, any resources, a writing space, and academic support inbuilt into the platform to help them construct their assessment. So it's a really fantastic product. And in terms of learning, if you've come through a learning roles, you might start, in front of a classroom or in a classroom, let's say, as a student. Then you're in front of the classroom. Then maybe you're managing programs where you're managing people in the classroom. This is like, I'm so zoomed out now. We work directly with universities and with academics within that universities on their assessments for their subjects. So my role is super customer facing. I'm working with the academics to help them build capacity in using the platform, to understand assessment design and improve their assessments, help them understand how to support their students using the platform and identifying at-risk students, creating meaningful interventions to help ensure that students know what they need to do, where to access it, and creating really meaningful learning experiences, not just for the students, but for the academics as well. So I work on all of the pilot universities and all of the enterprise universities in Australia and New Zealand, which at the moment is about 17 universities. So for context, the Australian market has 40 universities. So I think we're nearly at 50%, which is very, very exciting. The business also operates in the UK, where we've got about the same number of universities on board, and the rest of my team is over there. So it's a really fantastic, fun job where I'm basically on Zoom all day talking to academics from all different universities all over the country about learning and teaching and assessment.
Amazing. And this is, I suppose, almost your first foray out of just teaching STEM or software development, really various disciplines using Cadmus. Yep. But obviously you're still working on a software product. Your software engineering skills are still very much in demand for you to better understand how does the product work, what are its limitations, how do we best work with the product team?
Absolutely. I was waiting for the question. Yes, the answer is yes. That is true.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting space to be in because that background in engineering comes in handy. You know, it is an LTI for those playing along at home. That means it integrates directly with the learning management systems that the university have. So there are technical details around the integrations, around the compatibility with the various devices that the students and academics use, about the lockdown browser that we have an integration with for in-place digital exams. So sometimes I'm certainly the technical learning manager on hand to resolve any and all tech issues, but certainly working in software teams has given me a really insightful kind of approach with the product team, because there are things that go wrong all the time, you know, as with any SaaS product with integrations across 17 institutions, that things are bound to happen, and yet there is a roadmap of features that need to be built that might not have to do with the fire that's come across my desk today. And so it's important to know how to create processes for triaging these things that, you know, resolve them but don't disrupt, or that enable those targets still to be met for the product team, and to inform the product team just from like a user experience perspective and from a usability perspective. The learning team kind of becomes a bit of a voice of the user. I'm spending, you know, essentially the whole work week interfacing directly with our customers, and that kind of insight, the things that we learn from them, the way we see them use or not use the product, the features they like, what the issues and concerns are, what the priorities of the universities are, helps to inform our direction. And being able to represent that to the product team and help connect the product team directly with our academics to learn from them as well is really, really valuable.
Fantastic elaboration. And so your role is very different to the role of a software engineer, but you're still getting a lot of stuff done. And I'd really love to know, what are the kind of tools that you love using in your day-to-day work that help you stay efficient?
Absolutely. So we use the G Suite, we use Slack, we use HubSpot, and they all talk to each other, which I love. So it can become really helpful to know how to kind of direct your energy and attention, and also that these things kind of pop up directly within Slack. So no underselling the value of Slack integrations. That is my my guidebook. That is my source of truth with such jam-packed days and you know, back-to-back meetings. It's important to be able to easily see what's happening while it's happening, while maintaining your attention on the person you're communicating with live at the time. So knowing that these things are all talking to each other is really helpful. how detailed do you want me to be? This this can be as detailed as you'd like. I mean, we use HubSpot for contacts. We use HubSpot support inbox. We use Zoom and Zoom webinars for the roundtables that marketing runs. We use Retool to be able to hop into our platform as the academic and triage any issues that they have, or assist with, uploading extensions or marking groups and things like this. And then there's lots of in-house stuff as well. So proprietary information.
Yeah, things you have to build yourself sometimes. And I really like that idea of don't underestimate the value of a Slack app. If anyone's building a product that they want someone to use every day as part of their work, hey, having a Slack integration or a Slack app is a pretty powerful way of getting in front of people.
Absolutely. That library is full of treasures.
So you've had to self-learn a lot of things, Hannah, in making career transitions. Are there any books or websites or courses that you really love to visit or have found helpful in your career transitions?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I read a lot. I aim to read 52 books a year, which I have maintained for a few years now. And I don't mention that as a brag. I mention that because I would always find myself talking about books, and yet I hadn't read the books that I was talking about for a long time. And so I thought maybe I should just be reading more, because books seem to stay in my head and have an impact on my worldview and inform how I think. And so that's why I started doing that, and a combination of fiction and nonfiction. But in terms of the nonfiction, I read lots of like long form. It's almost like long form journalism, semi-memoir kind of style, where you're learning about systems but through people. And that always has resonated with me a lot. So I'm thinking particularly of Matthew Desmond and the books he's written about, eviction in America and the financial systems over there. There's a fantastic book called How Infrastructure Works, which is all about like the systems that support our like daily lives out in community. And that is might sound irrelevant, but the part that is relevant is that you're learning through the people. And I think that what I've learned is storytelling is very powerful, and letting people talk and share their stories is very powerful. So that is what I'm doing day to day, and learning about these big behemoth systems, something like the secondary schooling in industry, something like the tertiary education market. That is a complex beast, and people operate at different levels within these systems. They have different priorities, they have different goals, they have different considerations, and you cannot treat everyone the same or presume anything about those motivations and desires and goals. So being open to hearing stories and learning about how systems interact with people and people interact with systems, that's what I've always enjoyed. So those are my recommendations specifically, but more broadly, that kind of long form journalism turned book always lands well with me.
That's really fascinating. And did getting that getting to 52 books a year, did that require some effort or work on your part, or is it just picking the books that most interest you?
Yeah, well, first it required a library membership, because I am not made of money, and when you start reading at that volume, it can become quite expensive. But actually, I tried for many years not hitting it, and that was while I was at uni. But every year I read slightly more than I did the previous year, and I think that was really the goal, was just to increase. You can have a goal to improve the habit. It wasn't about hitting 52 books. It was about increasing the amount I was reading. And then, yes, something did change. I started full-time work, and I had a commute, and I can read on the bus without getting car sick. So that is what helped me hit that goal in the first time that I did, was reading every day, twice a day for my whole commute, and reading before bed. So every day I am reading. And yeah, well, listening to audiobooks, my dad would say, that doesn't count. And I'm thinking, well, I know something and you don't. So I think it counts. Yeah, so if audio is more your thing, highly recommend.
That's a pretty good argument for audiobooks right there.
Audiobooks don't count. I think
Um,
the author would have something to say about that.
yeah. I'm a big fan.
Huge fan.
Hannah, coming to the end of our conversation, I'd love to know, is there something that really excites you about the future at the moment?
It excites me about the future. Absolutely. I think the thing that excites me most about the future at the moment is people really taking their time into their own hands and really thinking about the role of work in our lives. And I think people are coming to realize, and perhaps it's the state of the economy, perhaps it's just people thinking differently about what they'd like their lives to look like, but just thinking, is this working for me? And, maybe the new currency actually is time. And so I'm always interested to hear from people who have alternate working arrangements, whether that's working fully remotely, building their own businesses, doing a variety of different things piecemeal to create work, working as a contractor, all these kinds of things that really revolve around time. So that's what's interesting me at the moment and giving me some hope for the future, because things changed a lot during COVID, and it feels like they may be going backwards a little bit in terms of the, flexibility with the workplace. But I think we learned so much in that time that is valuable to, process and implement in more COVID-free ways in the present day and moving into the future. So, yeah.
That's really cool. Actually, the last audiobook that I listened to was called It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work by the founders of Basecamp. Definitely
Love
worth a
that.
listen if you're thinking about time and how a great workplace can look.
Yeah.
Hannah, I'd love to know, how can listeners keep in touch with what you're doing?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I am, somewhat active on there. That's probably where they can keep track of what I'm doing. If you know me, I'm on Instagram, and you can find me on both platforms using my name.
Fantastic. Throw Hannah a follow on LinkedIn so you can keep in touch with her, and we'll keep links to her LinkedIn and to Cadmus and all of the things that she's mentioned in the show notes. You've been listening to Programmable. It's a podcast by JDoodle, and it really helps us if you hit subscribe or follow so that you can stay tuned for further episodes. If you just want to get started coding, head to jdoodle.com. Hannah, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time again today.
Thanks for having me.